Why is an orange called an orange? No, seriously. Who looked at this little citrus sphere and went, yep, orange. Because here's the absolutely unhinged part. The fruit and the color are connected. The color wasn't even called orange first. So today, we're answering one of humanity's most important questions. Not how to solve climate change. Not why your Wi-Fi dies when you need it most. Not why every YouTuber says, smash that like button. Why is orange called orange? And the answer involves ancient languages, trade routes, Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, Europe, and a fruit getting passed around like the world's most delicious game of telephone. Let's go way back. Before TikTok, before the internet, before someone invented the phrase, bro really thought he cooked. Back when humans were just out here doing ancient human activities. Eventually, people in Asia were cultivating citrus fruits, and one important ancestor of the modern sweet orange originated in Southeast Asia. Sweet oranges then spread westward through trade. But here, where things get spicy, the word orange did not start in English. English basically stole it. Respectfully, the word has a ridiculously long journey. Sanskrit, Persian, Arabic, European languages, and eventually English. That's a whole international flight for one word, and somehow the luggage was an orange. One of the early forms of the word is the Sanskrit term N a macron R, a letter 1E45G, referring to the orange tree or fruit. N a macron R, a letter 1E45G. That sounds less like a fruit and more like the name of a final boss. You have entered the N a macron R, a letter 1E45G, a temple. But the word traveled. It moved into Persian as something like narang. Then Arabic adopted it as naranj. And from Arabic, forms of the word entered various European languages. Basically, India to Persia, Persia to the Middle East to Europe, Europe to England, and eventually your local supermarket. This orange had more frequent flyer miles than you. Now here, where the word gets absolutely demolished by language evolution. In Old French, the word appeared in forms like plume orange, basically meaning orange apple, which is incredible, because apparently medieval Europeans saw an orange and thought, apple, but spicy. It's basically the Apple DLC. Eventually, the phrase got shortened and the word became orange, and English adopted it. But here's the really important part. The word for the fruit came first. The color name came later. Before orange became the name of a color, English speakers didn't generally have a dedicated basic color word for exactly that hue. So how did they describe it? They could use things like yellow-red or references to objects that were already that color. Basically, you'd ask someone, what color is that? And they'd say, a yellow-red. Language was fighting for its life. And then oranges became more familiar in Europe. People started saying, that's orange. Not, that is a yellow-red fruit. Not, behold, the citrus of intermediate chromatic properties. Just orange. And eventually, the color got the same name. This is one of the coolest things about language. We assume colors are these universal categories. Red, blue, green, orange, purple. But languages don't always divide up the color spectrum in exactly the same way. And sometimes a color gets its name from an object. Orange is a famous example. The fruit existed. People had a word for the fruit. The fruit was, well, orange. And eventually, people used that word for the color. So when you say, my shoes are orange, you're basically saying, my shoes are the color of that fruit. Congratulations. You have been describing your shoes using produce. Human civilization peaked when we named colors after snacks. Now you might be thinking, okay, genius. Why did that fruit get called N-A-macron R, a letter 1E45G, in the first place? And this is where things get a little murkier. The exact deeper origin of N-A-macron R, a letter 1E45G, isn't completely certain. There are theories connecting it to words associated with the orange tree in South and Southeast Asia. But linguists aren't just sitting around with a time machine asking ancient people, hey bro, why'd you call it that? Because unfortunately, the ancient Orange Naming Committee left no minutes. What we do know is that the word traveled through multiple languages and changed along the way. And that's completely normal. Languages are basically biological organisms, except instead of eating food, they eat each other's vocabulary. Think of it like the world's longest game of telephone. Someone says N-A-macron are a letter 1E45G. Another language goes, Narang. Another goes, Naranj. Europe gets involved. The word changes again. Eventually English looks at it and goes, orange. And now billions of people call the fruit an orange. This is how language works. Words don't get downloaded from the language app store. They mutate. They get shortened. They get misheard. They get borrowed. They get mashed together. And sometimes they survive for thousands of years while looking completely different. It's basically Pokemon evolution. Except instead of Charmander becoming Charizard, N-A-macron R, a letter 1E45G, becomes orange. And here's the part that makes this whole story hilarious. The color orange is named after the fruit. So technically, if oranges had never become known in English-speaking Europe, the color might have ended up with a completely different name. Imagine living in an alternate universe where everyone calls orange yellow-red. Bro, check out my new yellow-red Lamborghini. Absolutely criminal. Or imagine someone asking, what's your favorite color? Purple. Nice. Mine is orange. What's orange? It's like orange. What does that mean? The fruit. We have achieved circular logic. And because the word traveled across languages, you can find related forms all over Europe. French has orange. Spanish has naranja. Italian has arancia. Portuguese has laranja. English has orange. Notice something. They look different, but you can still see the family resemblance. It's like looking at a family photo where everyone has made progressively worse decisions. N-A-macron R, a letter 1E45G, a narang. Naranj. Orange. Orange. This tiny word has crossed continents, survived centuries, changed pronunciation, and somehow ended up on a bottle of orange juice. Cinema. So let's answer the question. Why is an orange called an orange? Because the English word ultimately comes through a long chain of borrowing, with roots going back to the Sanskrit word N-A-macron are a letter 1E45G. The fruit's name traveled west through languages, including Persian and Arabic, and eventually entered European languages. English inherited a form of that word as orange. And then the color got the name from the fruit. That's it. That's the lore. The fruit came first. The color copied its homework. The fruit was like, "My name is orange." The color was like, "Can I borrow that?" The fruit said, "Sure." The color said, "I'll give it back." And then the color absolutely never gave it back. The next time you see an orange, remember, you're not just looking at fruit. You're looking at a linguistic war criminal. A citrus sphere that traveled across continents and somehow named an entire color. And honestly, respect. Because without this little guy, your orange hoodie might be called something like yellow-red garment, and nobody wants that. So remember, the fruit was orange, then the color became orange, and English basically said, "Yeah, that works. Thank you for coming to my TED Talk. Now go eat an orange." And think about the thousands of years of linguistic chaos that had to happen for you to call it that.